The Innocence Project, or IP, is a criminal justice reform project that provides pro bono, post-conviction legal assistance to people whose claims of innocence can be proven by DNA testing of the forensic evidence. Our mission is to free innocent people who have been wrongfully convicted and use what we learn in these cases to enact institutional reforms that strengthen the justice system to prevent wrongful convictions and make it more fair and more just. Since 1989, approximately 300 people in the United States have been exonerated by DNA, including 17 who were sentenced to death. The IP was either the attorney of record or a consultant in the majority of those cases. Barry Scheck and I co-founded the IP in 1992 as a legal education clinic at the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law in New York City. In the beginning, all of our casework was done by Barry and me and our law students. As more and more people were exonerated, it became clear that wrongful convictions are not isolated or rare events, but instead the result of systemic defects that can be precisely identified and addressed through policy reforms. So, in 2004, we established the IP as an independent nonprofit. We started with 8 staff members. Since then, the staff has grown to 54. We established an intake department to formally screen the 3,000 requests for legal assistance that we receive each year. We now have 7 full-time attorneys representing 270 clients around the country. We created a policy department with expertise to take a systemic approach to correcting the causes of wrongful conviction. And we've helped build the Innocence Network, a group of organizations working to free innocent people and strengthen the system. That network has now grown to 56 member organizations around the country and 9 more organizations overseas. The Innocence Project recently completed a 5-year strategic plan, which outlines our intention both to continue freeing the wrongly convicted and to scale up our successful policy advocacy to prevent wrongful convictions. Over the next several years, we will do even more to advocate for reforms that make the justice system more accurate, fairer, and true to its purpose. At the state level, we'll focus on enacting reforms in 3 key areas: preventing eyewitness misidentification, recording interrogations from start to finish to prevent false confessions, and ensuring access to DNA testing and DNA databases for people seeking to prove their innocence. Our goal is to implement these reforms in enough states that our improvements become the norm across the country. Nationally, we're working to improve the state of forensic science. Flawed or improper forensic science is a leading cause of wrongful convictions, having played a role in roughly 50% of those overturned by DNA. A 2009 report by the National Academy of Sciences affirmed the IP's concerns about the need for reforms and offered a blueprint for national oversight and expanded research to ensure fairness and accuracy. We are working with scientists, forensic practitioners, Congress, and the White House to enact the reforms recommended in the National Academy report. To accomplish these goals, we're significantly expanding our policy capacity, doubling the size of our policy department. Our strategic plan projects that the expansions will require millions in new funding over the next 5 years, in addition to our $7.5 million annual general operating budget. The unique leverage point that the Innocence Project enjoys to bring about the kind of substantial change in criminal justice which has been lacking for the last 40 years is that not only are we involved in exonerating people who are wrongly convicted, but we are also about public safety. Because every time you lock up the wrong guy, the real bad guy is out there committing other serious violent crimes. So not only is our project about civil rights for the wrongly convicted, it's about public safety. For a long time, social scientists have done powerful research into the problems of eyewitness identification and to the phenomena of false confession. But their research fell on deaf ears, with most of their critics saying, well, that's okay in the lab or in a classroom, but it doesn't mean it happens that way in real life. Well, the powerful narratives of our clients who are wrongly convicted, based, for instance, on a misidentification or on a false confession, provide that real-life experience to their research. Together, the research and the narrative allow us to get much further in implementing our reforms than anyone would have ever thought. In addition, we are able to persuasively demonstrate that every time you use a certain flawed procedure to convict an innocent person, that same flawed procedure is responsible for letting the real bad guy to remain free to commit other violent crimes. So when we talk to states, when we talk to police chiefs and district attorneys, we're not only talking about protecting the rights of the innocent and the wrongly convicted, we're talking about public safety. Every time we walk an innocent man out of prison or off of death row, that's a major success. In our policy work, we measure the number of reforms introduced and enacted at the local, state, and federal levels for eyewitness identification procedures, the mandatory recording of interrogations, the strengthening of forensic science, and enhanced access to DNA. We also look at the number of our amicus briefs accepted by appellate courts throughout the country. Even though we are not a party to the case, we submit friend of the court briefs to educate the judges about the lessons learned from our exonerations. And finally, the number of partnerships with criminal justice stakeholder organizations, including members of the police, prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, and scientists. Although some of the causes of wrongful conviction are not surprising, others are rather counterintuitive. The most common contributing cause is eyewitness misidentification, present in 75% of the cases. It is also not surprising that jailhouse informants lied under oath in 20% of the cases. However, it is surprising, indeed counterintuitive, that a person would falsely confess to a crime he did not commit unless the police held a gun to his head. In fact, in 30% of our cases, completely innocent men who were neither beaten nor threatened nevertheless confessed to murders and rapes they had nothing to do with. Also, the general public mistakenly believes that crime labs are as professional as they appear on CSI. More than 50% of our wrongful convictions involved improper forensic science. And finally, it's a sad commentary that all too frequently defense lawyers were incompetent or inadequate, and prosecutors committed error or engaged in outright misconduct. Close to 300 innocent people have been freed from prison by DNA testing. 17 of those walked off of death row. The IP provided direct representation or consulted on most of those cases. Our other accomplishments include our work to enact 85 state and federal reforms that prevent and address wrongful convictions. The IP has spearheaded the development of the National Innocence Network, a group of independent, nonprofit organizations, educational institutions, and public defender offices that assist inmates trying to prove their innocence. So far, there are 56 projects in the U.S. and 9 overseas. And there's a growing and shared awareness in the country among Republicans and Democrats, prosecutors and defense attorneys, policymakers, and the public that there are serious flaws in the criminal justice system and there are proven solutions to fix them. The greatest historical challenge that the Innocence Project faced was the national indifference to defendants in the criminal justice system. There was a national assumption that they're all guilty, and so no one really cared. Our work changes all that. We have provided scientific proof of innocence in almost 300 cases. So for the first time, people are not looking at these procedures that are used by police and prosecutors and crime labs as simply tools to put away the guilty. People are now concerned that these same tools could put away the actually innocent. And so we have overcome that historical challenge with our exonerations and used it as a wedge to transform criminal justice. The Innocence Project will implement its recently completed strategic plan, which calls for millions in additional funding over the next several years, in addition to our annual general operating budget. Our key goals also include free more innocent people and clear our waiting list of requests for legal representation, expand our state-based policy advocacy, focus on 3 key issues. 1, preventing eyewitness misidentifications. 2, recording interrogations to prevent false confessions. And 3, ensuring access to DNA testing and databases for those seeking to prove their innocence. We also engage judges to help prevent wrongful convictions through the establishment of a strategic litigation unit at the Innocence Project. And finally, bring scientific research, national standards, and oversight to all the forensic sciences. We need to do much more to educate the public about the criminal justice system. The flaws that we can identify through our work, the remedies that will solve those problems, all of that needs to be more effectively communicated to the entire population. Right now, too many people are defining their beliefs about the criminal justice system based on assumptions, presumptions, and stereotypes. That all has to change. The best way for us to close that gap will be to educate the public and to make the entire criminal justice system much more about science, much more about getting to the truth, and ultimately much more just.